Hello, good morning to you all. Welcome to our current section. So we are on Unit 6 and this is our first section for this unit. So today we'll be looking at the definition, meaning and also the component of the working capital management. So by the end of this section, these are our session objectives. 1. You should be able to define and explain working capital. 2. You should also identify the various components of the working capital. Alright, so explain some concepts to working capital management and also explain working capital management. Alright, so let's move on. Alright, so let's start with working capital. So what are we saying about working capital? So this is our working capital. Alright, so working capital is a finance that an entity needs to support its everyday operations. Alright, so from the word working capital, the amount that the money or the organization use to operate its daily activities, to the money that will be needed to support our daily activities, that is our everyday operation, is the working capital. Right, so the amount tied up in working capital, I'm reading from this side. The amount tied up in working capital is equal to the value of raw materials, also our work in progress and finished goods inventories, and accounts receivables less payables. So that is the net working capital. Alright, so the amount that has been tied up in the raw material that is being used by the organization, and also the uncompleted works is what we term as the work in progress. Right, and we also have the finished inventory. So there are some inventory that has been finished and maybe it's still in the warehouse. Alright, the amount that has been tied up in those inventories is also part of the working capital. And of course, the account receivables less account payables. So these are all the components of the working capital. So the net working capital, as it was defined in our first point, is also defined here to be the current asset minus current liability. All right, that is what is termed as the net working capital. Okay, let's move on. All right, so the components of the working capital. So these are the various components we talked about in the previous slide. But for clarity's sake, let's go through them. So we have four major components of the working capital. One is the inventory. We have the trade receivables as well. We also have the cash and bank balance, and of course the trade character. So let's talk about the inventory. So inventory is the raw material and also the work in progress that is used to produce goods, and the finished goods kept for sales. So the inventory of every organization is not just the raw material that has been used. All right, so if they have the raw material and it has been transformed, but it has not gotten to the finished stage, we call that one the work in progress inventory. All right, it is still in the process of transforming, but it has not come out as a finished or a worked product. All right, you also have the raw material. The raw material itself is also an inventory, and of course the finished goods that are still in the warehouse, or the finished good that is yet to be sold, is also the finished goods inventory. All right, that are kept for future sales. We also have trade receivables as a component of our working capital. So trade receivables is the amount of money that is owned by customers of a business for goods or services that has been sold or rendered by the business for which the customers are yet. So that is the keyword. The customers are yet to make payment for these goods. So that is what makes it trade receivables. All right. So they are our debtors, right? Someone who owes us. We've sold goods to them, but they've not made payment for this, or they've not make any financial exchange or financial commitment for the goods or services that has been rendered to them. And of course, they become our debtors. Alright, so debtor is the same as the trade receivables. Right. We also have cash and cash balance, and I know this one you are familiar. Right, so cash and cash balance, the amount of money that the company has in its cash till or cash or bank account. Right, so the money in hand, the cash in hand, and also the cash at bank is what makes up the cash and bank balance. All right. We also have our last component here, which is the trade creditors. So trade creditors is the amount of money owned by the company to its suppliers for goods and also of course maybe other things that they bought from them. All right. So we said something about trade receivables, that the amount of money that customers owe to the company. Do you get it? But the trade creditor is the amount that the company rather owes to others, which is suppliers of goods or maybe other service provided. So these are the various components of the working capital. All right, so let's look at the characteristics of the working capital. So we are saying that different business will have different working capital characteristics. All right, every business has its own characteristics of its working capital, but these are the three main aspects of these differences. So these are the three main aspects. So one, we have the holding inventory. Holding inventory, so from their purchase from external suppliers through the production and also warehousing of finished goods up to the time of sale. All right, so holding inventory. So listen to the keyword, holding inventory. All right, so you purchase the inventory or the raw material. Right, so now we know that we have various components of inventory. All right, so we can't use raw material because raw material is just another component of the inventory. So you've purchased inventory from external suppliers. All right, so through the production stage and warehousing of the finished goods up to the time that the goods are ready for sale, they will be held at a particular place. All right, so that is the holding inventory that we are talking about. Definitely business will incur costs for holding inventory. So what do you think will be some of the costs? Storage cost. All right, and of course insurance cost will also be one of the costs that a business will incur for holding inventory. All right, so holding inventory in the warehouse, so keeping those inventory till they are ready for sale. So from the acquisition stage through the production and also warehousing of the finished goods is what is termed as the holding inventory or the holding period. So taking time, I'm on the second point here. Taking time to pay suppliers and other accounts payables. All right, we also have so that is another aspect of these differences. So taking time to pay suppliers and also other payables. We have our third difference to be allowing customers or debtors time to pay. All right, so that is the account receivable, and also taking time to pay suppliers is the account payables. Okay, so let's move on. So what's the role of this working capital management? Role of the working capital management. So one, this is our first point. A business needs to have a clear policies for management of each component of working capital. Right, so you should have a clear policy for the each component of working capital. That is, if let's take or maybe component like inventory. All right, so there must be a clear policy on the holding period of inventory. Maybe you don't want to hold your inventory for more than 30 days. Let's take account receivable collection period. If debtors owes you, how many days are you giving them to settle their debt? So all these are the clear policies that management must put in place for each of these components that I've mentioned. All right, so this is our second point. We have the working capital management. It's a key factor in an organization's long-term success, and as such, a business must therefore have a clear policies for the management of each component of the working capital. Alright, so it's similar to what I just explained, that if you are unable to manage your working capital in an efficient way, you might run at a loss, or your debt or irrecoverable debt will be very high. Right, and as such, you have to have a clear policies for the management of these various components. We have our third and final point here. Alright, so we are saying that management of cash, marketable securities, accounts receivables, accounts payables, and other means of short-term financing is the direct responsibility of the financial manager, and it requires continuous day-to-day supervision. Alright, so when it comes to management or managing the cash of the organization, and also marketing the securities, you managing your accounts receivables or your debtors, your creditors or accounts payables, and other means, right, is the direct responsibility, and as such, so direct responsibility that you are solely or mainly in charge of it. All right, so you have to have a clear real performance when it comes to the management of cash, and also the marketing marketable securities as a financial manager. All right, so good. So this is the end of this section. So we've explained the meaning of working capital and its various components. All right, and also the importance of the working capital management. So make sure that you read through as we move to the next section. All right, so we have some section question here for you. These are some questions that you can try your hands on. All right, so you can walk through as you revise your notes. All right, so in our next section, we'll be looking at the working capital policies and theories. That is section 2. All right, so you can read ahead of time, and I will see you in the next section. Thank you. Bye bye.